Welcome to EPG Pathshala. The title of the module is State Politics, the question of autonomy, the challenges and the future scope of the subject. I am Ashutosh Kumar. I happen to be a professor of political science in Punjab University. I am also the principal investigator of the EPG Pathshala project in the subject of political science. In this module, we are basically going to discuss about how state politics as a discipline has evolved, how it has become more and more autonomous, it has got its own distinct identity. So in this module, we would discuss that for quite some time, state politics was seen as an appendage of Indian politics. It was never accorded an autonomous position. In fact, the neglect of the state politics as a discipline should be related to the neglect of the state as an autonomous unit for political and economic analysis. For quite some time, because of the dominance of the Congress party, the state politics was seen as a carbon copy of the national politics. It was understood that the economic policy and the public policy of the states were to be determined by the high command politics of the Congress. So the dominance of the Congress was one factor. The another factor would be the emphasis on nation building and the state building. So it was thought that to focus on the state would be too parochial, it would be too narrow-minded. So we should concentrate on the analysis at the national level. So there would be all India analysis, whether it would be the caste question, farmers question, agricultural development, political economy of development. It would be always India as the unit of analysis. Then there was another factor why state politics was neglected, and that was too much emphasis on dependency theory, modernization theory, and those theories, they always privileged nation state as the unit of analysis. But as we know, gradually what has happened, because of the political economy of reforms which started taking shape in 90s, and also because of the emergence of the identity politics, and also because of the rise of the national parties decline, and the rise of the state level parties, what has happened basically is that now we have so many state level parties, we have so many state level leadership, and all these factors, state level parties emergence, the emergence of the identity politics, and also the market economy which privileged decentralization of the economy. Now we have a polity in India which is no longer centralized. We have a polity which is decentered, which really privileges the states, and we have very strong state level governments which play very important role in both political and economic arena. And this has basically referred to the emergence of the state politics as a discipline in its own right. Now we have another thing which we should consider, and that is that in India the states are very large. They have a large population, they have major resources. Our states are comparable to the countries of the Western Europe or the world. Just take the example of Uttar Pradesh. So as such, because of the size of the state, because of the resources states have, because of the kind of globalization which is going on, where the states are competing against each other for attracting the foreign direct investment as well as the private investment, because the identities are getting politicized and mobilized, and they are territorially bound in a reorganized states. Now we have a situation where we can see that you can't understand the Indian politics without going through the study of the state politics. So states are becoming the most important unit of political and economic analysis. But there are challenges also. In this module, we are going to also have a look at the challenges which are coming up in the discipline of the state politics. The challenges are there in the sense that the state politics is very volatile, and different states have different kind of social and economic configuration. The issues are also very state specific. So how to have a common framework to study the state level politics and economy is always going to be a great challenge. So if you want to have a comparative approach, it is always going to be a very difficult task in the discipline of state politics. But as we would see in this module, that there is hardly any doubt that state politics has come of ages, and now no analysis of India can be completed without focusing on the states and also focusing on the sub-regions within the states, both from the political angle as well as from the economic perspective. In this module, we talked about the growing importance of the constituent states in India and how they have become more and more important both in political as well as in economic terms over the last 3 decades. We also discussed the factors which explain why states were not really playing such an important role in the earlier period, and why state politics as a discipline was not really being given a kind of autonomous status, which has not been the case for recent India. So in this module, we go into the varied traditions, including the emergent ones of the academic focus in the discipline of state politics, and look for some of the most important insights gained by each of them. So while we discuss the different traditions of studies of state politics, we also discuss that what have been the important insights which we can gain, and in the process we also talk about the challenges and also the pitfalls of having a kind of comparative method to the study of state politics. In the last 3 decades, there has been a greater level of recognition of the constituent states, Indian Union, as the primary unit of political and economic analysis. And this has been almost like in the sharp, because with the growing importance of the state as a political and economic unit, there has been also much more focus on the study of state politics as a discipline. And this is something which is a very new kind of development, because earlier state politics was seen as a mere sub-discipline. It was considered as an appendage of the Indian politics. So focus was on the study of Indian politics and not on the study of the state politics. So even when we discuss about the comparative politics, there was always emphasis on the study of the nation states rather than the study of the constituent states. There would be like a India study, all India studies, rather than studies of say Punjab or study of say Maharashtra or a study of Karnataka. So this is a phenomena that Indian states are being considered as the unit of analysis. They are being privileged as the unit of analysis, and even in the comparative analysis we find that the states are being used as the unit for analysis. Now when we discuss the different traditions of the scholarship on the politics of state and sub-state regions and all, you have different kind of studies which are coming up. Some studies in the arena of the state politics have only concentrated on one state as a unit. So entire state, constituent state, has been taken as the unit of analysis. But there are other state politics analysts who have adopted comparative approach, in the sense that they are comparing more than one state and they are taking up one issue and they are comparing the politics of more than one state, and then they are drawing their own conclusion. Comparativists who are not focusing on the state as the unit of analysis, they are not really comparing 2 states or 3 states, but rather they are going beyond the state, or say they are looking for sub-state categories. So they are focusing on sub-state regions rather than focusing on states. So that kind of study is also happening. So to recapitulate, we have three traditions. One tradition is where you focus on one state, only the focusing on one state and looking for some kind of theoretical findings. The other tradition I talked about was comparing more than one state. It can be two-state analysis, it can be three-state analysis. Now, in the next part of this module, we discuss about neglect of the state level studies. So the question comes that the states were always there. It's not that India has now 29 constituent states and 7 union territories. India always had states, and states always had the constitutional basis of power, and there were state government, and we know that India is a federal unit. So there has been a dual government, there has been a division of powers. So why there has been a neglect of the state? So earlier we can say that there was this argument that every state had its own political specificities. So as a result, a broad brush analysis that could do justice to the state level political analysis became very difficult. So it was always considered very difficult to have a broad brush analysis, because it was thought that every state had its own specificity, every state had its own kind of peculiar problems and every peculiar solutions, unique solutions. And also it was also argued that every state in India was so large and had so many complexity. So, and then the politics was so volatile. Like Rob Jenkins has argued that the Indian states are in a way mini republics, they are mini democracies. So how can you really compare the two states? It would be very difficult to compare two or more states on any issue, because every issue, every subject you discuss would have its own regional flavor, would have its own state specific nature. So it would be very difficult for the analyst to compare, and that may have been the reason why states, the interstate comparison was not really encouraged much. It was not really very well appreciated for a long period. As far as the earlier period of independence was concerned, there can be other reasons also for the neglect of the state specific studies. One can be that there was this emphasis on area study. Under the area study, only the states were discussed, the countries were discussed. So it would be like third world study, where you compared India with Brazil, India with Argentina, or India with the Southeast Asian countries, or the developmental experience of India and China. Under this liberal political development theory and modernization theory, Asian, African and Latin American countries, the new democracies were compared. So grand comparative analytical framework were developed by the liberal schools of modernization and political development, and these all states in Asia, Africa and Latin America, they were considered as a developing states. Now, when we refer to this new Marxist literature also, which came up as a critique of the modernization theory and development theory, again you find that the countries were seen as a kind of a unit, countries were seen as a single unit for analysis. So whether it was in the dependency world system theory and the development theory, or it was in the modernization literature or political development literature, there was hardly any emphasis on the constituent states or regional states. The entire focus was on the country. Second factor which also explained why state politics was neglected was because of the Congress system. There was one party, Congress party, we all know, this was winning almost 2/3 seats in the first 3 general elections. Even in 1967, though the Congress came with a reduced majority, but even then the Congress was winning power at the center. Congress won power at the center, and despite losing power in 8 states, it bounced back to power in all those states. So because of this dominance of the Congress system and the high command politics, states were regarded as little more than subordinate components of a highly centralized governmental structure, and there was a little realization that they were evolving as powerful political arenas in their own rights. So basically state politics was seen as a poor carbon copy. It was seen as a just kind of a, like being guided by the high command and the states not having any autonomy of their own. There would be another factor which would explain why state politics was not really very well appreciated. And this was because of this focus on this all India politics or institution building, or the need to keep India together and to develop a feeling of a nation building. So any perspective which was not a national perspective, which focused on the states, was seen as parochial. It was it was considered a mark of parochial attachment or a sign of academic laziness or incompetence. Political analysts were supposed to focus on India rather than focusing on the states within Indian Union. As we all know that in the recent period, the state level studies have gained, not only because the Congress system has disappeared, but also because the national parties have not really done well, except Bharatiya Janata Party in the recent time. Otherwise, national parties have declined and the state parties have come up in a big way. So with the rise of the state parties and also with the rise of the state level leadership, now there is a greater focus on state politics as a discipline. And that you can see after 1967, when for the first time the rise of the state party was noticed. Same year, 67, 68 onwards, like late 60s and the 70s, you had many literature coming on the state politics, like the edited volume by Myron Wiener, Itwal Narayan, John R. Wood, and also 1989-90, the two volumes edited by Francine Frankel and M.S.A. Rao. So all these volumes, when we talk about whether the volume edited by Wiener or Itwal Narayan or John Wood or Francine Frankel and M.S.A. Rao, they basically focused on enumerating the determinants of the state level political dynamics in minute empirical detail. And for the academics contributing to these volumes, states provided a more or less a self-contained universe called microcosm as well as macrocosm. So state was seen as a kind of a small unit, but at the same time a self-sufficient unit within which the politics was conducted and analyzed. Mind you, all these writings which came in the form of the state-specific essays, they focused on one state and they only provided the state-specific detail, and these details were like about their geographical location, demographic character in social terms, political history, politico-administrative structure, changing nature of political participation, then all those parties coming to power and the voting preferences and all those kind of empirical details were there. But most of these writings, they never took up the economic aspect of the politics. So it was not a political economy, it was mainly political sociological approach. Even when you see the Rao and Frankel argument, the edited volume, the state-specific essays did refer to a political economy approach, talking about the economic transition which were taking place in the aftermath of the Green Revolution, when the Green Revolution was ushered in the late 60s. But it only talked about like how the economic transition was impacting upon the social transition and how the decline of the dominance of the traditional elite was taking place in different states in the caste terms, and how the peasant caste were coming up in a big way, having the social political power. Then these three volumes, you will find that after these three volumes, we had lots of books which came up which were focused on the states, right? So state-specific articles, that would be the second phase, you can say, in the field of state politics arena. You have the single authored books which focused on one particular state. They were comparatively richer than the academic essays which were published earlier, but also one can say that these essays were also these volumes, self-authored, single authored volumes, they also focus too much on the empirical details and never attempted to have any comparative framework or comparative framework of analysis. So then we come to the third kind of work. Before that, let me also add CSDS Lokniti NES survey data contribution, because under the auspices of the CSDS Lokniti, lots of state specific articles came in the journal called Economic and Political Weekly, and also a journal called Seminar, and some other international journals also which focused on South Asian studies like the Asian Survey and others. Now in these writings, the focus was mainly on the electoral politics in the states, and these essays referred to the determinants of electoral politics in different states. They also referred to the survey data to show the attitude and the opinion of the electorate with different background, social background. So that would be the second phase. The third phase, very quickly we can come to the interstate comparative studies. In the interstate comparative studies, there would be individual state specific studies would be brought forward, and there would be a kind of, you can call it, second generation of the literature on state politics. In this second generation of state politics, it was argued that the states were comparable to each other. Why states were comparable? States were comparable because of decentering of the India's political economy, politics and economy. Even then, every state was under the same legal constitutional order. So the robust form of federalism enables political analysts to undertake a comparative analysis of the politics of India's new democracies, as Rob Jenkins says, which have almost identical institutional infrastructure and also which operate under the similar economic policy framework and the legal protection enshrined in the constitution. So you have this similar legal constitutional structure, and also you have the same similar economic policy framework and the legal protection across the Indian state. So all these states became ideal ground, as Meenal Desai says, that the states become ideal ground for comparative analysis, for holding constant certain factors such as its position in the sphere of the international relations, geography, ecology, religion, and early political formations. So basically, Suhas Pachikar and Yogendra Yadav also presented a preliminary frame for interstate comparative analysis, arguing that there are certain areas where the states' similarities in terms of politics and identity. Like Adam Jetfield also we can refer, he considers India ideal for studying party system on two grounds. First, India is comparable to the Western democracies for having a lengthy democratic history and a record of free and fair elections, and also with its many parties, and these parties can be short-lived, they can be non-ideological, they can be highly ideological, they can be highly personalistic or poorly organized. So we have parties and parties. We have different kind of parties, the cadre-based parties, the mass parties, the ideologically rooted party, and non-ideologically pragmatic parties. So as such, India provides a kind of laboratory-like situation, and these parties have different kind of presence in different states. So even for the electoral studies, even for the study of the political participation, nature of political participation and political representation, India comes out as a laboratory, and different states can be compared very well with each other. How does making comparisons? First, while considering the fact that the studies focusing on the politics of a single state which has been under the same administrative system have distinct advantages in terms of enabling much more controlled experiment, sifting through much thicker empirical details and capturing the nuances of the state politics in all its social and spatial aspects would have a much better kind of purchase, would have a much better kind of finding, much more nuanced kind of understanding. And also, most of the time we talk about exceptionalism. So when you compare two states or more than two states, you also find out whether actually the state under study has that exceptionalism about its politics or not. So this is another point. then most of the findings, most of the writings on the state politics, they are from a conventional viewpoint. But if we use compare method for analysis, interstate analysis, or for identifying commonalities and differences in the politics of two or more comparable states, and these findings would have a reflection and would be always theorized on a broader canvas to make them more relevant, and also for allowing some kind of reflections on the situation in foreign states also. So comparative method allows a larger number of case studies to be undertaken, and the research findings, causal explanations, theory building exercises also receive greater credence and acceptance. Third, we can also say that any theoretical framework that would emerge from an interstate or intra-state study would not only help the comparativists undertaking the study of a larger number of states, but also be able to reframe the existing debate and interrogate successfully the cogency of conventional formulations often derived from an analysis that took the nation state as the unit of this. So just to recapitulate, most of the arguments which have come up in the context of Indian politics, they have taken up India as a unit of analysis. When you take state as a unit of analysis, and when you take not one state but more than one state which are comparable to each other, and then you do the comparative study, probably you can come out with a new kind of reflection, a new kind of findings. And also, as I said, that the research findings would have a greater credence and acceptance, because you are not studying one state but you are studying more than one state. So it would have a more purchase value than single state analysis. And then the third one is that you can also, when you do this kind of study, you can also have a methodological pluralism. You can use different kind of method for a comparative study. Finally, we come to the sub-state regions. Here there has been this trend that we should not focus only on the states, we should also focus on sub-regions, historically, culturally, geographically, economically well-defined sub-regions. So the need of the hour is that we do not discuss only the state, we do not focus only on the states or focus on the nation state, but we focus on these sub-regions also within the state, and to see that how the ethnic, communal, caste cleavages are undergoing the process of democratization, how they are being impacted by the process of democratization, and also to study the other social political cleavages like the regional and rural urban cleavages, unevenness of public and private investment, growth and development, and unequal access to political power. Sub-regional differences in economic terms. Within a state also, some regions are more developed than other regions in the same state. Like we can talk about Vidarbha in Maharashtra. The coastal Maharashtra is much more developed than Vidarbha. Likewise, the demand for separate Gorkha land as a state, or demand for Bodoland, or demand for Bundelkhand, these are very much connected with the uneven development which has taken place and the way spatial disparity is increasing under the impact of the new economic policy. We can also refer to this Panchayati Raj and municipal bodies and the 73rd constitutional amendment, which has given a kind of autonomy to the panchayat bodies to a limited sense. So it always makes sense that when we study the panchayats in a comparative mode, or we focus on the big cities, metropolitan cities, we focus on why some sub-regions within the state are more developing than other sub-regions, or we can also compare the sub-regions which are part of more than one state. So the sub-regions which share the territorial boundary. So this is the way we can develop. The challenges would be there because you can't compare apples with oranges. So we have to compare the apples with apples. But even when we compare the comparable states, we have to understand that there would be always differences, and these differences also have to be addressed in a way that we can come out with some conclusions, we can come out with some kind of findings which would be helpful. So, adopting a highly localized approach to bring about regional, sub-regional distinctiveness invariably involves an in-depth study of entire range of factors that make up a political situation. So, we have to understand the internal dynamics of Indian politics and the economy, and for that we have to focus on the states, and we also have to focus on sub-regions within the states. Only then we can really have a better kind of interstate studies, and we can carry out several experiments in terms of selecting multiple units as well as different research techniques, straddling the disciplinary boundaries, and we can have a much more nuanced study of the state politics, and also in turn the politics at the all India level. And the same goes true for the way economy has evolved in India. So, because states are emerging as an autonomous economic unit under the spell of the new economic policies, liberalization, so it's not decentering of the politics, it's also decentering of the economy. And so, as such, we can always say that the state politics has arrived as an autonomous discipline, and we need to not only focus on the state, but we need to focus on the states in a comparative framework, and also go beyond the states and look for sub-state regions within the states. In this module, as we discussed, we saw that now in the last 3 decades, because of the rise of identity politics, also rise of the identity-based political parties, which are state level parties or the sub-regional level parties, and also because of the rise of the state level leadership, and also because of the new economic policies, which are all these factors, they have led to decentering the economy and the politics of India. So as a result of this, what is happening is that the study of the state is becoming very, very important for the study of Indian politics. So this was the crux of the module. But we also saw that in the state politics discipline, there have been 3 different traditions. In the earlier traditions, we had the focus on only one state, and the focus was on having empirical detail about the states. So in the first tradition, in the first generation of literature, we saw that all the literature came from a political sociological viewpoint. The focus was on the demographic configuration, electoral result, caste configuration and all. Then we had the second generation of studies. In the second generation, there would be a volumes which would focus on not only the political sociology but also political economy of the state. But in the recent period, there has been another trend, and there lies the challenge also. The challenge has emerged because now there is an attempt in the third generation of studies to have a comparative study, to have a comparative perspective, and the attempt to develop an all India level framework which can analyze the state level politics, state level economy. But then there is also attempt to focus on the sub-regions, the historically, culturally constituted sub-regions within the state, and also compare the sub-regions from one state to sub-regions of another state. So there lies the challenge of comparing apples with apples and not comparing apples with oranges. So you have the challenge like when you consider the kind of farmer suicide in Punjab, in Malwa region, then you also go to study the farmer suicide in the Telangana region or in the Vidarbha region of Maharashtra. So across the state, the cross-state analysis, or within the state also, as a result of new economic policy, coastal Maharashtra is developing at a faster rate than the Vidarbha, or in Andhra, the erstwhile Andhra Pradesh, Telangana was far behind the coastal Andhra. So this kind of study also is getting salience in the discipline of state politics. So there lies the challenge that how to compare and how to reach to certain conclusions on the basis of our comparative analysis, so that the comparative analysis can allow us to have a common theoretical framework which can be useful in the study of the politics and the economy of the states in India, and also can present us an opportunity to theorize about all India level politics and economy. So it's not really the challenge only to analyze and theorize about politics and economy of a particular state, but also to have a kind of meta-analysis, how to have a kind of a nuanced study, the micro study, and on the basis of these micro studies we can theorize at a larger level, and we can understand the Indian politics in a much more meaningful manner. That has been the crux of this module which we have already discussed.